That's interesting what you were saying, like not feeling like you could say you were Guatemalan. I felt like I couldn't not. Like I just felt like such a black sheep, like just looking at me and all the white people around me. It was just like, that's all that people saw. And they'd be like, oh, where are you from? Just like, and that's what, like, you know, that sentence, that question in itself has like, is so loaded in so many other, like in a lot of other things now. But for me, where are you from was just like, you are different, you are different, you are different, you are different. And I was just like, yeah, I'm Guatemalan, and that's just like what it was like. Hi, my name's Poppy, I'm Guatemalan, I'm adopted. That was just like how I thought I would introduce myself. Like that was just, hi, I'm Poppy, yeah, I'm different, I know, just don't like fuck off, don't ask me. Yeah, but just totally different from what you
what came up for me when you just said that was, I think I told a story last time as well, that when I was about 2 years old, my grandparents' friends came around and said, and they've all got Essex accents, so they all speak like this, everyone's got a voice, they've got different voices, you know. To me, that's my whole family speaks like that. And they came round too, and they said, why is he speaking like that? Why does Mario speak? These visitors asked, why does Mario speak with this posh voice at about 2-3 years old? And it's funny, your question about masking, I'm coming back to that in my head, because, you know, I think at a really young age, I was like, I'm not, on some level, I was like, well, I'm not really adopted. And that's what my mum wanted as well, was that I wasn't really adopted, that I was just hers, and she loved me, and it wasn't there. So, you know, I developed this, on some level, that little thing latched onto a certain kind of sound, and I still fucking speak like this now. And I've got a funny relationship with my accent, because it doesn't feel necessarily like mine in some ways. But anyway, yeah, I've got this voice, and that was an example of how I think masking for me. And I did talk about adoption, you know, I did stay it, but I think I was more, on a deeper level, I was more towards the masking rather than the here it is side, if that makes sense.
As in like more masking, as in like more kind of like, this isn't really real, and
I think pushing down the adoption, and being like, I'm just my parents' son, you know, and in a sense I'm their white son, you know, I'm their natural son, I'm part of, I'm from Essex, I'm from the UK, you know, really trying to touch closer to that. And
I can for sure relate to that, like at some points, just like just like kind of looking in the mirror and being like, who the hell is that? And being like, just then remembering, because it's like having almost like blinkered vision of like looking around at my family, seeing them, and just like kind of forgetting what the rest of me looks like, and just like assuming and being their child, part of that family. But then sometimes going to the bathroom and looking in the mirror and being like, just like completely freaking myself out, like remembering that I'm not, and I look so different. So like there are parts of that there which I feel are like similar threads.
That's essentially, I think I also had both things, like you're right. Like I remember we both felt that family parties, like I remember feeling like in a bubble, and I think you had something similar. I think I remember that, like, if my whole family were there, I'd be like, there'd be like this real deep sense, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what are we all doing here? But then at other times I remember, which is really not what I feel about identity now, but I remember thinking, well, I kind of look out of these eyes and I don't see myself. So I don't need to be raced. I just look outwards, or like I don't need to be anything in particular.
Yeah.
Or something like
but
that.
It's a weird it's a weird there's like a mental maneuverment that's going on there that we are doing that I don't think other people are aware of in the family or in my adoptive family, are aware of like what is actually going on. And that's a really interesting thing that like brings to mind, just like I've heard other discussions from adoptees talking about like transracial adoption and just like the very unique impacts that that can have. And I think that maybe this is what we're talking about, is one of those things that's kind of like a dissonance towards yourself, a dissonance towards like not being reflected in some kind of way, and like putting on these goggles or these eyes that only look at the things around you but disconnected to the you and how and your genetics, which, as much as we say, you know, as much as like at least, you know, in my experience, like, you know, there's an aspect of like encouraging like color blindness, like it doesn't matter what you look like, blah blah blah, but it does, and you notice it from such a young age. And just the lack of being mirrored in that kind of way, and the like cognitive sort of maneuverments that you do to ignore that or manage that or navigate that, like are very isolating things to be doing. Like I've never had a conversation with somebody else that has that experience, and it's really difficult to try and describe to somebody as well if they don't really know. It's almost like I think of it like I have this image in my head now of like I could be me standing up, and then also like there's another me, almost like a phantom ghost me, that can take a step backwards and be like, there's two me's here. There's the one that's like orchestrating being in the world, and there's the other one here behind, which is like also me, but no one ever really sees that, and no one really knows about these kind of weird psyche like distortions about who I am and who I had to be, or like who I it's weird. Weird stuff. That's
so interesting, and it really brings up for me something that I sort of knew I wanted to talk to you about. Was actually like recently I've been really like quite enthralled by reading about non-binary identity. Like I don't know if it's something you know much about, but like I had never thought much about it, but I'd always thought, well, that sounds interesting. You know, I just kind of been aware of this thing, and there's different parts of it that feel so like resonant with me, but not in a very typical way. So like I think probably more often people who sort of move towards like being non-binary, they have like a kind of dysphoric sense of their identity. They feel like they've always like been between two worlds, and they then sort of develop like a pleasure and a joy in leaning into that and like loving that, which is really interesting, because those are all three things that I have, but not in a very traditional way. Like I've been like you're saying, like you've put words to something I've had that's kind of like a slight resentment towards and disalignment or something with how I've presented through my life. It's not just been about like I hate being a man. For me, it's not been that. It's not been like, oh, I just don't want to, manness is not for me. But it has been throughout my life, like this, like I work against myself in some, or like, you know, like if I'm in my push school and I'm too brown, I'm not push enough. In my family, I'm too brown, I'm not push enough. But then if I'm in an adoptees meetup, or if I can't go to Guatemala because then I'm too white. So it's this like resentment there's this between two worlds thing where my family, I feel like I've always inhabited, like, if there's ever a space that's like not, it's uncomfortable, that slightly, and it's between things.
Yeah, there's always something that's not quite right, that's not quite there, and it's infuriating. It just feels like so like isolating, so lonely, so like being rejected again. There's some part of you that's rejected, that's just like not able to fully be in any one of those worlds 100%. Like when I've been in Guatemala and Central America, for me it was always language. Like I go walking down the street and people are like, she's from here. As soon as I open up my mouth, it's like, I feel like sometimes at some points when I would feel like more down, it would be like I would just feel like but my language would be betraying. Like it was just like, no matter where I go, I'm not going to fit in. I'm not going to be like good enough or whole or just like home, in a sense of like you are just part of that culture, taken for granted, like, and it's taken for granted by strangers or whoever you come up to meet in that society. And yeah, it's again another like branch of just like sometimes feeling more like more rejected and more like isolated, more like there's something that's not quite right, that's made me look like not good enough to be able to just be. I don't know. Yeah.
Totally. That was another one of my eureka moments. The first time I went to therapy with the guy who was shit, but he asked me about my dreams, and I said, in my dreams there's always something that's not quite right. And that was a really big point in my life, saying that phrase, something's not quite right. And I sat with it, and I can remember doing that in therapy and picking my hand up and being like, oh wow, that means so much, that sentence. And yeah, so there's the between two worlds thing, which I think is quite non-binary again. And then also like this, like recently I've been like leaning into it more. Like I've been like wearing some dresses and like being like playing with my presentation more, and like it's early days, but like talking to my partner about it, reading stuff, and it started to be like this really lovely thing actually. And thinking about like, anyway, this link between adoption and non-binary for me seems really, really linked.
Yeah, it sounds like almost kind of your, like there's parts of it, like there's the shadow and the light side to it. There's this shadow side which is like it can feel really isolating, and like kind of you're out on a limb on your own, not quite being able to go fit into an exact shape somewhere. But also the lighter side is maybe using it to your like empowering it and reclaiming it in a way that feels more, it allows for all of it to exist, but also for you to be like creative and fun with it too, which is really beautiful. Yeah. No,
I'm loving it. I had another question for you. So don't worry if you don't want to answer this, but would you ever want to adopt?
I was asking him. I have actually, like, this is a side thing, but my boss at the moment is adopted. Yeah, and she's much older than me. Not much, she's older than me. And so it's really, sometimes occasionally we have little conversations about it, and it's really interesting. It's like, so I've never had anybody else who's adopted like in my day-to-day life. It's really cool. But yeah, I asked her the same thing, and she was saying she's never really thought about it before. And I've thought about it a lot. Well, I've been asked it before and had thought about it, and I don't think I ever could. I don't think I ever would. That's a rhyme. I just feel like there's so. Firstly, I feel like I do want to have children of my own, and I feel like that will be such a incredibly healing experience to be mirrored in that way just for myself. Like there is, you know, that part of it that is like self fulfilling. Yeah, and that's something that I really want. And I don't know, I just feel like it's just never really come up for me in my head, like, oh, that's something I feel like moralistically like I want to do, or like there's a part of me, and I think maybe it's like still a younger part of me that has like this defiant sort of anger that's like there, which is like asking this question of like, who the fuck are you to like look after somebody else's child, like, and I think that that's still about my own like anger and processing that, and other things as well, but yeah, I suppose like that's kind of stayed with me still, and maybe I don't know if that, I don't know, I just don't, in a lot of ways, I don't know, I think I don't know what it's like adoption. I only know adoption as like being this thing from adopting someone from, you know, from really far away, and that I have issue with, and I haven't even thought about like adopting in the UK, but for now I have a stepson, and that's like that's me. That's good for me. And I think adoption things like inform part of that as well. Yeah. But I don't think I ever would. There's just not really a draw to it, or a calling to it, which is how maybe people come to, I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting. No, it's just always tempting to ask them. Yeah, you know.
I don't know. I also think ultimately adoption is damaging. There's no doubt about it. Like, to every single person that is adopted, like there is some a wound and a hurt there, and there's a separation, and that's not how we're built to exist. Like, that sounds, I don't know if that sounds however it's going to sound, but like that's just not you know, evolutionarily, like biologically, like what's supposed to happen. And so in a way I feel like if I in an ideal world, you know, there would be more, I would, rather than necessarily adopt, like maybe I would work more towards keeping families together and getting the resources and the support that they need.
You asked like what's healing, what was healing for me, and I think that a summary of that answer was moving away from having to like fight, I'm the center of the world. Like I like kind of knew in my brain that wasn't true, but like fighting like I am, and I felt like becoming an adult and calming that and feeling safer has meant being like, oh my god, like I'm just here with everybody else, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that I'm always in that place, but when I can be that, and more often I can be that now, that is like one of the key sort of healing things for me. But one thing you just said, we can stop whenever, but I really wanted to say one thing as well. I'd like to tell you about it. That basically I was walking out of work, nothing special was happening. I was doing this trip. It must have been over 6 months ago now. I was doing this walk up the path to where I live, which is like basically next door to my work when I used to live in this place. And I was going through a gate, and now I'm telling this story. The gate's never been significant before, but it strangely is now. And literally, in a very like nothing way, didn't cry, I didn't feel touched or inspired. This like thought just like popped into my head. I was like, in this really weirdly calm way, I just went, you were in the womb. I was like, you were in the womb. And I had this thought, and I was like, that's a bit of a weird thing to think. And I didn't really even give it much time at the time. And then a few weeks later, I think maybe I talked about it in therapy, maybe I talked about it to some other people, and I remembered this visitation thought I had about like being in the womb, and I realized that I had never ever in my life been able to identify with being carried like that. It felt like a betrayal to my mum. It felt like, it feels like acknowledging the existence of this woman in the world that did that for me, and like we did that together, but I can't, like, going there is still too hard. And it felt like that first moment of being able to like come to terms with that, which is something most people don't have to come to terms with. It's just such a given. But I think all my life I had felt that didn't happen to me, which it did.
Because it's almost just like too painful to go there. And I think we learn, like, I think you, at least I learned that in just like a very almost like animalistic way from a young age. Like that pain feels like it's pitless, like so never ending, because it makes me wonder about, like, you know, like I was saying, like being separated in that way from a young age. Like one of the most basic things that you're being attuned to is just being soothed in some kind of way, and that separation, and then having to like kind of then meet a stranger and them be your caregiver, but that you're a stranger to them and they're a stranger to you, and this is all non-verbal. There's something that's always not quite right, as you said, and like your journey of like soothing yourself and being soothed by that caregiver is just not quite right. There's something that's going to be slightly off about it. Well, at least in my experience. It's not to say that's the same for everybody. Like, I think that's what part of the difficult thing is about, like, you know, adoption or fostering or anything like that. It's just like learning somebody else.